As the days are getting longer, I'm getting more of a chance to get out after work and go for a flick. The other thing when it warms up though is that the wind can also be pretty hectic in the afternoons. Good thing about the Swan is that you can usually find some area, depending on what side of the river you want to fish, or around a certain bend where you can get the wind to be at your advantage. So I went out to a spot where I knew there was a really good drop off. A lot of these rays around, so got to be careful. Especially when the wind is choppy here, they're a little bit harder to see even with the polarized sunnies. Lucky enough to hook up one nice and early, get the confidence going. This was just on the Rapala Imposter that I was using in the last video. Thought I'd just give it a crack on the flats here. Just bobbing on the point of the drop off here. So it's the extreme low tide today, so rather than walking out miles, I went to this spot where I know that there was a drop off not too far of a wade out. I was using the 8'6" rod as well, so I didn't really want to wade out too far and have to use a landing net. Trying to find somewhere where I was going to be able to walk it pretty close to shore. With family responsibility, sometimes I'll just get a real short window of 30 minutes to an hour after work where I'm out fishing, so I'll try and pick the spots which are going to match the conditions as best as I can. For the flathead, I've had most of my better sessions on the rising tide and then towards the top of the tide, but I still catch fish on the low tides. They might not be the same caliber or as in the biggest numbers, but you just got to get out when you can. So I've got the 8'6" rod here, and I've just tied on a double clutch in 90. Because I've got the wind at my back, I can cast these a bloody mile. So I'm launching them as far as I can, and the drop off here is not like a real steep one as well. Basically I've walked to the end of like what looks like a beachy area, and then there's a start of a weed patch, and it slowly gets deeper and deeper. So I'm just working the double clutch either across the line of the weed where it meets the beach area, but to be honest, because of the wind direction, I'm sort of just launching it as far as I can because it's still very shallow, so it's still going to be in the target areas, and just using my eyes to look for patches of seaweed and running the lure across the patches as best as I can. But again, when it's windy like this, it gets really choppy and it can be a little bit harder to see, so you just got to do the best that you can. Also don't mind if a little bit of chop on the water. I reckon it fires up the fish. Just creates a little bit of commotion. I think when it's really still, the fish might be able to see your leader a little bit better. Also get a better look at your lure and realise it's not a fish. Whereas when it's a bit of chop and they react a little bit better. Or maybe that's just what I tell myself when it's really calm and I'm not catching any fish. Nice little flatty. Felt a little bit bigger because the trebles were hooked up all over him. You got the triple trebles on the double clutch, which can be a bit of a pain to unhook. Got to watch your fingers. I noticed when I was looking to take this out that this flathead had a bit of lunch hanging out of his mouth. He had two of his little crabs hanging out of his gob. Gave it back to him so he could finish his dinner and send him away. Good to know what they're eating though. You gotta love that sound of snapping braid. Luckily the lure only went a few metres in front of me and I could see it floating. Otherwise it would have been an expensive cast. Now it's time to tie some new knots with the really thin 5-pound braid. I've had a lot of trouble with this braid snapping when I'm using double uni knots, so I'm trying to tie these bloody FG knots in the wind. Extremely frustrating, but got there in the end. One of the cool things when you are fishing a low tide like this is that you can see a lot of the contours of the areas that you would usually fish, which has got a lot of water over the top of it. So you'll find little points in the sand which you might not be able to see usually. So for example here I'm walking down and I found a little point or a little sand spit which I didn't even really know existed on the low tide, and I could see bait sort of hugged up against it. The other thing that you'll see on the low tide as well is, if you're lucky, you might see a few flathead lays, so they'll be easier to see where flathead was sitting before, and also if you are spooking flathead in the shallows you get a better an idea as well. So after getting a little shell out of my shoe, I started working across this little drop off on that sand spit I was talking about. Got a hit from about 2 meters from when it went from the sandy area to the weedy area. Number 3 on the board. Not the biggest ones today, but pretty good fun on the low. Good way to spend your afternoon and wind down after work as well. Always dangerous doing it by hand with the 3 trebles. All it takes is one shake. One in the finger. After letting the little mate go, I saw a bit of commotion. So there'd been fish jumping out of the water all day, and most of them were mullet. You can usually tell the difference between mullet is that when they jump out, they all belly flop. But if you look to the right there, I saw a little flash here. That one dived straight back in. So I was thinking it might be a tailor. So I decided to start casting out and ripping this double clutch in a lot faster with little whips to the side. There it is. These double clutches are unstoppable when it comes to tailor. Not the biggest one, but it was nice to be able to see a little school in the shallows and cast straight at it. Here I made the rookie mistake of holding the bib of the lure while I let the fish go so I wouldn't get another barb after last time. and you'll see what the results were. The lure started not swimming right. To be honest, I've been doing that with this same lure for probably about the last 4 years. I think this is a lure that I caught my PB flathead on probably 2 or 3 years ago, so it's had a lot of great use. What you'll see here is that the bibs come loose here, so probably repairable, so probably sit in the lure box for another year until I get around to repairing it. Either way, it was a sign to go home. For more flathead, Perth Metro fishing, please subscribe. Feel free to ask any questions in the comment section.